Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Salatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Anbiya'i wal Mursaleen. Allahumma allimna ma yanfa'una wanfa'na bima tu'allimuna wa zidna bifadlika ilman wa ta'liman innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. So welcome back one and all to al-Risala al-Jami. We are now on covering the last kind of material of the class. Inshallah, next week we'll have some Q&A. If you have any questions to begin with, maybe while we're waiting for others to join. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shaheed, how's it going? When are you gonna become my neighbor? My next door neighbors they want to sell. So if you have $1 million, you can just just.
My sister's in Florida, mashallah. I keep meaning to visit her, so.
Alhamdulillah. Inshallah, we'll go to Florida and eat some. What is it? They have the steak they eat there. What's it called? Not alligator steak on the Maliki school or something.
Is that permissible?
I'm not sure. I actually know. In the Shafi school, no, because it's not fully aquatic. So, but I think in the Maliki school, everything's makruh in the Maliki school. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
You know about seafood then?
Mhm.
Is Shafis, do they say that you can eat anything from the sea?
Yeah, anything. As long as it's not harmful. Yeah, so octopus, squid, anything that's fully aquatic is fine. So even like a seal, I'm sure. So not a seal is not fully aquatic, but let's say a whale, right? A whale or a dolphin. You can have a beached whale that will survive for a while, but it's fully aquatic, right? It's not on land, but like a I don't think you couldn't eat like penguins or seals because they're not fully aquatic. Obviously you have to slaughter them. I don't even know how it works with a seal anyway. If you could eat a seal, I don't know what we consider it. But it's not. So if I think for the Maliki school, it's like semi-aquatic. It is Sayd al-Bahar as well, right? And generally speaking, the Maliki school, they have this principle is that every single thing, most things that are forbidden are simply makruh, are not haram to eat. So they have a position, I don't know if it's relied upon or not, about eating the dog. So is it haram or makruh to eat a dog? I don't think it's relied upon. That's just kind of their general principles. They agree with everybody else that it's forbidden, but they understand forbidden in the sense that it's meaning you shouldn't do it, not that it's actually like threat of hellfire. Allahu Alam. Okay.
Will we have would it be like a test next week?
No, there's quizzes. I don't know if you've seen any of the quizzes.
Yeah, no, I've done them all. I've done all of them by last week's class.
Yeah, I don't think I've actually uploaded last. I didn't even give them the quiz for last week or this week. So, but otherwise, just do the quiz. That's all it is. Just do the quizzes. That's all.
Sure.
Khair, inshallah. Suhair, Umar, any other questions? Saadiyya. Okay, khair, inshallah. We'll go straight onto the text then, inshallah ta'ala. So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Ya Rabb. So we're continuing with lesson 11, sins of the limbs 2. So sins of the hand. Obviously there are almost infinite things that we can do with our hand, but it's just useful to mention some things. These include cheating while weighing and measuring. So anything you do with your hands, for example, typing an offensive message, answering, let's say for example at work, your work is very, very strict and they say no social, no social media whatsoever in the workplace, and then you have WhatsApp app on your computer and you're just doing it anyway. So obviously that's a sin of the hand, right? Anything you do with your hand, touching something that's haram to touch, taking something that's haram to take, striking somebody, harming somebody, any of these things are haram. Deceiving, right? So deceit is is deceiving, is haram, categorically haram when it harms someone else, right? So I deceive Shaheed into sending him, I kind of, I deceive him into doing something, right? So by enabling myself to take a right away from him to harm him somehow, there's obviously haram. But deception itself, if it's not harmful, it is offensive, right? Which is called tawriya. For example, so if Shaheed asked me, Farid, are you sick? I say, yeah, I'm sick. So, well, why are you at work today? Well, I meant I'm sick internally. I mean, spiritually. Right? And so that's kind of deceiving because that's not what you usually earn. That's not the default assumption, right? So as long as if I intend to lie, I am saying something that's not the case, that's called lying. But if it's just simply indirect, it's offensive. You shouldn't speak like that. And it only has a role in certain scenarios when you're trying to avoid harm or something like that. But otherwise, so deceit that results in harming others is categorically haram, right? But deceit otherwise is going to be offensive, and it's kind of speaking in ambiguous terms, right? Unless there's some kind of benefit, what was it? I think it was Mahmoud Darwish. He was a famous Palestinian literary figure. I think it was himself with his protege, or he was a protege of another literary figure at the time. I think this is like 50s, 60s, 70s Palestine. He meets his teacher, and his teacher asks him, where are you coming from? He says, I'm coming from the sea, coming from an area, it's called, I think Jenin, I think the area is called Jenin. Or I'm not sure, maybe some in Palestine or next to the sea. And so he says, I'm coming from the Bahar. So his teacher says, yeah, I'm also from the Bahar. Right? And he says, what have you come to learn? He says, I've come to learn the Bahar. I've come to learn the sea. So this is literally, poets talking to poets. So one of them says, I'm from the sea. That in their urf, in their terminology, the sea means this place. And the other person says, I'm also from that place, meaning the sea of meanings and concepts and ideas and profound connections. And the student is coming to him to learn the sea. And the pun is also that prosody in Arabic is also. So that's completely different, right? There's a kind of particular benefit in it. There's a particular kind of thing, puns and these kind of things, completely different. But just mere, for example, deception. Like it's just unbecoming. It's a low thing. If it harms somebody else, it's going to be haram. If it doesn't harm anybody, like saying, do you have a brother? No, I don't have a brother. So, okay. Meaning I have two brothers. Like, come on. That's just like weird and low and unbecoming a Muslim, but it's not haram per se, because you didn't harm anybody, you're just deceptive. And that's not with the hand, right? But deception with the hand is, you deceive somebody concerning, let's say, what you're buying and selling, right? Stealing and all other forbidden actions, such as killing or hitting somebody without legitimate reason. Pushing somebody, taking someone's chair, eating someone else's food. So eating someone else's food, you can do that if you have explicit permission or understood permission, right? So sometimes, let's say for example, you're in a workplace, it's just understood that these biscuits, anybody can eat them, right? Now out of wara', you should be extra careful, right? I was in the mosque the other day and the imam was there and he would only touch one particular thing. He says, I brought this, I will touch this. And then one of the guys in the mosque was like, well, none of this, there's a charity thing that's locked, there's a fridge that's locked for charity, everything else is just masjid stuff. The chances are that somebody left it here and they really want it tomorrow, it's fairly slim to none. But out of wara', the imam, he didn't want to drink it, I drank it because I don't have wara', may Allah forgive me. But if you get the sense that it's somebody's thing, it's fine, you can take it, but otherwise you can't do that. Like if you're not confident, you can't do that. Khair, the sins of the feet, these include of many things walking to do the haram, like walking up to somebody to slander them, walking to somebody to go and kill them, walking to somebody to harm them, getting into your car to do something haram, right? And so the general principle is whenever you travel in order to do sin, the Sharia does not acknowledge the fact that you are traveling, and that the Sharia says you're not a traveler. So the dispensations of traveling don't apply to you, right? So if you are traveling to do sin, as opposed to sinning on the way. For example, a woman, may Allah forgive us all, right? She's traveling, she's not wearing a hijab because, may Allah give us strong iman. She doesn't have the iman to wear a hijab. So she is sinful while she is traveling, but she is not sinful by traveling. Right? As opposed to, for example, she just had an argument with her husband, and her husband says, "No, I do not want you to travel. I'm sorry, you cannot do that." She said, "Well, I'm going anyway. I don't care." So now she is sinful by traveling. Her traveling itself is haram. So the Sharia will say, "You're not wearing a hijab was one thing. That was sinning while traveling. But this is sinning by traveling. Your traveling itself is haram. You're not allowed to do that." So now, if you want to join prayers, you can't. If you want to shorten prayers, you can't. If you want to break your fast, you can't. Right? You have to fast Ramadan because you're not considered a traveler. Right? Because the Sharia has not acknowledged this type of travel. Etc. So any kind of going in any direction, moving in a certain way, going somewhere, using your feet to go and do the haram is haram. Stepping on somebody is haram, of course. Right? Anything with the feet. Sins of the private parts, right? And this is what the Prophet ﷺ said: "Whoever can guarantee for me that he will not sin with that which is between his two chin bones, his mouth, and that which is between his two legs, his private parts, I can guarantee him paradise," right? Which is illicit sex. So this includes, when we say zina in Arabic, what does this mean? It means sex before marriage, or it means extramarital sex. Right? I don't know if the word extramarital sex actually includes sex before marriage technically, but so cheating on one husband or wife is obviously haram, and sex before marriage is haram. Right? This is all haram. And this is one of the saddest things in the world, honestly, is that there's so many easy ways that people can satisfy their needs, and it just doesn't happen. On a simple level, for example, husband and wife, they can't get over stupid arguments, so then they're not able to fulfill each other's sexual needs, and so and that plus grudges, and so then it just becomes like, not even a big issue. In fact, I don't even care about sexual need. I just want to cheat on my husband or cheat on my wife just to get back because she did this or she did this. It's very sad. It's like, well, you really had to push yourselves to do that? Like, really? No. Or other things is like two religious people at school, their parents wouldn't let them get married, so then they do something haram. It's like, why? That doesn't make sense. Just get married. It's not the end of the world. So people make the marriage so unbelievably difficult that religious people do haram things. Like, why? Like, you are otherwise a religious person. I say, would you like this meat? And you say, no, is it halal, haram? Like, halal, haram matters to you a great deal. And yet, it's so complex that they can't just do these basic things. Right? Or whatever kind of weird pressures that things come in and say. It's not that complex. Allahu A'lam. So then it says sodomy. So sodomy is two things in reality. So liwata, which is homosexual sexual relations, right? Which is haram, be it between men and women, of course, or anal sex with one's spouse, which is haram as well, right? This is also haram. And so these are two different things. So these are haram. Masturbation is also haram, right? And so generally speaking, deriving any sexual pleasure from anything, any thought, any image, any motion, any physical activity besides one's spouse is haram. Right? Besides one's spouse is haram. And there's a very important book on this. I can't remember the exact title, but it's by Mufti Adam al-Kawthari. It's something about fiqh of intimacy or something like that. I can't remember what it's called. But he goes through lots of different things in different madhahib, and it's very useful. Intercourse, for example, while menstruating. Right? Obviously, it'll be the same thing. Right? It's haram. So, we have to be clever and be wise. Let's take an analogy, right? An analogy of what people being clever, right? And how we can avoid haram is myself and my nafs and the chocolate bar, right? So today I'm not going to eat because whatever, I don't have breakfast, I don't have time, I'm trying to do Quran, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that, I'm trying to do a lesson, right? So then I don't even have breakfast. So now I'm really, really hungry. And so instead of having a nice healthy breakfast at home, I'm being really, really hungry. I say, I'll just eat tonight, because who needs food anyway? Who needs the dunya anyway? Who needs the dunya anyway, right? So then what happens is I'm hungry, and then I'm really, really hungry. I'm super hungry, and then you go and find something really quick and go and eat a chocolate bar, 2 Snickers bars for breakfast. And so it's like, Farid, you could have just had a nice, healthy muesli breakfast or whatever it is, boiled eggs or whatever it is you could have had in the morning. And then because you are such a zahid, or you're so incapable of organizing your own physical needs, you ended up doing something like that and going and having 2 chocolate bars for breakfast, which is kind of like, the chocolate and the sugar is the least harm in it. Chocolate's probably not harmful, but the sugar in it is the least harm. More about the whatever weird oils in it and all these other things. So it's the same thing. People, you see it so many times. Otherwise religious people doing stupid things. Like, why did that even happen? Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, well, why does it happen? It's like, well, because people aren't realistic. Parents aren't realistic, and we're not realistic with ourselves. Right? And so, just, it's like, yeah, you're a human being. You need to eat. You need to have relations like anybody else, like a normal thing. And so let's organize these things. Can it happen in this way? No. Okay, let's get married. Can't get married. Okay, is it happening between husband and wife? Okay, why not? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Try and sort it out. Okay, then move on. It's like, it's not that complex. It's just, but people kind of just ignore these things, and then the bubble bursts, and then they say, oh, what just happened? That was pretty dumb. Right? And particularly if we're not living in the East. If you're living in the East, there's so many restrictions and so many cultural things around marriage and around this. It does make it very, very difficult. That makes it very, very difficult. But if you live in the West, it's like, it's not the end of the world if you go and get married at 15. It's not the end of the world if, for example, you don't even, you go and get married to somebody at 35 and no one else really knows about it, and you just go, it's not the end of the world. Like, there is a way to avoid the haram. It's not the end of the world. Or again, in a 10-second marriage that can just happen. Again, your hijabi friend is dating this guy and he's also Muslim, and you're like, really? She's dating somebody? That doesn't make sense. And then it's like, why can't they get married? It takes 30 seconds. I hereby marry myself to you. I hereby accept that your marriage. What's that? How long did that take? 10 seconds? From something that's haram and zina to something that's a sadaqah. It's something that is, it's something very sad, right? It's something very sad that people do these things, unfortunately. Go ahead, Shahid.
In the Shafi school, is it permissible for a girl to be married without her mahram's permission?
No. So in the Shafi school, so in the Shafi school, a woman is not a contractor in marriage to begin with. She's not even, it's not about permission, she's just not involved in the contract. Right? So how does it work is that I marry my daughter to so-and-so, or I marry my granddaughter to so-and-so. So she might come up to me and say, oh, I really want to marry this guy, can you please, let's talk to him, So she might be the mover and the shaker in the whole story, fine, it's not a problem, right? There's nothing haram with that, nothing unbecoming or anything. But the issue is she's not a contractor. Right, so she either, if she if she's a virgin, then we don't need her permission, and if she is, obviously she get her permission, and obviously she should be involved. But I'm talking about in terms of technicalities, right? And if she is not a virgin, we need her permission. We need her explicit permission. But otherwise, she's not a contractor. So all we need to do is establish she is not opposed to this. That's all. Like, she has said yes, you go ahead. And then it happens. But the point is, so that's the scenario of the 2 people getting married. But in the Hanafi school they can, and there's no form, and naturally we should get people involved. But I'm just saying here, I'm not talking about the normal how marriage should happen. I'm not talking about the perfect marriage. I'm talking about how, like, just avoiding the haram. So it's not that difficult. But again, people make things too difficult. It's like,
Would it be better in this context then, say the young couple, the religious couple who are together, that they got married without their parents' permission, taking the Hanafi rukhsa, as opposed to committing haram in that sense?
Yeah, of course, because you're going to do something agreed upon as haram and ugly, and so you should do that. Now, ideally, we shouldn't work like that. What we should do as parents, right? I mean, I remember being 12. Sorry, guys, to speak so personally, but I remember being 12 and making dua, Ya Rabb, please get me married. Okay? So it's like, just be realistic. Like, realistic, right? Is that here you have teenage kids, okay? 12, 14, 16, 18. You have an 18-year-old kid in your house. To honestly believe they're not interested in the opposite sex is fairly retarded, right? Allahu A'lam, unless there's something, people are different, right? But it's like fairly normal, right? Or people have these really weird and kind of imaginations about their girls, like, oh yeah, my daughter's 14, of course she wouldn't be interested, and I won't tolerate any discussion about this. Like, no, she's 14. What are you talking about? Of course she's going to think about these things. Of course she's going to think about these things. It's like, and so these are normal things, and so it just basically is like, let's help people out. Let's help teach people deen, teach them the limits, and have develop that relationship with them. Be like, hey, if you're interested in somebody, like my friend, for example, again, this, I'm talking about the West here. I'm not talking about the East. The East, there's so many levels of, so many levels of traditions and systems that it does honestly make it much harder. It could be much better, but the point is the rigidity. It's just, you can't break that rigidity. You can't just do it. You can't. It's very difficult. But I'm talking about here in the West, right? My son, in 10 years, right? He's 6. He clearly likes this girl. And why can't I just go and talk to the family saying, listen, obviously you're not going to get married right now in that sense. But why can't they, for example, do halal dating? They're going to get married, we have a little party, and they just come over our house sometime, come over your house sometime. What's wrong with that? It's known. The point is, what is the point? Is it should be like known, these two people together. Do they have to have, a fantastic job? Do they have to have these things? No, it's okay. I remember that in England, many people, many religious families get married at 16. Why not? Does it always last? Not necessarily. Do you make mistakes? Like Mufti Minks talks about his first marriage, right? It's okay. Not the end of the world. But it's like, when you see how much haram people do, it's like, oh, okay. What was it? Where was the point? Like, where was it? It wasn't like you were there and reciting Quran the whole time. Right? When you go to Mauritania, so I know people in Mauritania, kids memorizing Quran in Mauritania, and they're climbing it to the top of a hill to wave their mobile phones to get reception in order to look at pornography. It's like, well, you should get married then, shouldn't you? Right, here we're not talking about some kid in LA. We're talking about some kid in, it's like, yeah, just get married. It's like you just acknowledging reality. The deen is a very real religion. It's very real. It's very real and deals with reality as it is, as opposed to what it should be, or what it could be, or what I'd like it to be. And so these are real things, and So otherwise, it's kind of all sorts of crazy things happen. It's like as if it's not going to happen again, or as if it's not going to, And worst comes to worst, masturbation. So, well, it's haram. So why do you want that to happen? It's like, and so it's not. It's just there's a balance, right? You can't just let anybody marry anybody and just do whatever you want. Of course, what I'm just saying is, particularly in the West, there's many ways around haram relationships. It's not that difficult to find those, right? And such things, right? So again, I mentioned that book, and you can look at that there. And obviously, it's worth noting that in Islam, if we're not already aware, relations between husband and wife is something that is recommended. It's something is good, right? And it's something loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a sadaqah, it's an act of worship, right? And it's not something bad, right? And so that's obviously another kind of thing, is that people have like these weird taboos in their head, or these kind of things. Like, it's not like that. The difference between, so we have classical Christian way of looking at sex, Islamic, and then the West, right? So what is it? In the Christian sense, it's something bad, but I guess if you have to, go ahead, but it's something really bad and, it's like low kind of thing. Now, the Islamic point of view, which is a sadaqah, but it has its place. So it's not in the street, and it's not on the media. It's something that is good, should happen, but it has its place. And then we have the modern system, which is a reaction to the Christian, in the West, is it has to be in the street, everywhere. And it's just horrible, and it's not nice. And then that completely perturbs and disturbs the actual concept of reality. because it's not that glamorous in reality, right? So the concepts of what it should be like and etc., it's not actually like that. And so then it changes and have a weird sense of what actually is happening, right? And it's just really weird, and it's not healthy at all. So the healthy balance is this thing is it's a need, it's a healthy thing, it should happen, and that is there, it's there in a place in order to that, so that these thoughts and ideas and actions don't happen, right? And worst thing is, the worst kind of thing to happen is when it happens in a marriage, it's just a horrible thing, right? It's just horrible. And, people can forgive, subhanAllah, and that is a sunnah, right? If your husband or wife cheats on you, you forgive them and you have sabr and you say, don't tell anybody, you don't do this, you don't do that. That's the sunnah, but that's subhanAllah. Like, it was a Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, he was asked that question, what would you do? Someone asked the Prophet in front of him, what would you do if you came home and you found a man with your wife? He said, I'll keep hitting him with my sword until his blood was cold. Right? That's what, most people will be like, right? What is it? What's the song? What's it called? Hey Joe, right? Jimi Hendrix, right? That's the thing. It's like it's just a no. That's most people's sentiment, right? So yes, people can get past it, but it is pretty hard, right? A scenario of genuine cheating in a family. It just ruins the family, And again, did it really have to happen like that? Couldn't it have happened any other way? Couldn't mum and dad try and just put the differences aside, try and get back together again somehow, or separate in a beautiful divorce? That it's okay, it didn't work out, and then, find then their emotional and physical needs somewhere else in a halal, beautiful way. Inshallah, both can get married on the same day, to a brother and a sister or something. That can happen, right? It doesn't have to be disaster all the time and drama. Khair. Sins of the whole body, these include unruliness towards one's parents and fleeing from the battle line. And sorry, another part of this thing then is we mentioned that that sex in Islam is not something bad, but also something you have to communicate about, right? So again, classic scenario: a woman she is sexually starved, and that's a cause of frustration and a cause of strife in the marriage. Number one, and then number two, the husband doesn't treat her well, and then it's like something happens, and it's like there's no reason why she shouldn't cheat on him. And it's like, well, why don't you talk about it to begin with, or vice versa? It's like, let's talk about things. So people don't talk, and it's like, well, it was so difficult to talk about. They end up doing something completely haram. It's like, that's retarded, stupid, it's wrong. It's like, talk about things, try and sort it out, try and work things out. And people do these things, and unfortunately, it's just it's not it's just not being realistic. Don't assume someone else understands what's going on in your head. That's not communication. You have to communicate, talk things, speak things out. This is how I feel. This is what's happening. This is what's not happening. All of these things. Khair. So sins of the whole body. These include unruliness towards one's parents. Right. So generally speaking, the Shafi school, obedience to parents is not really obedience to parents. It's, as phrased here, unruliness or being disrespectful. So you have to obey your parents per se, not really. Is that you have to be respectful to them. So when you say obey them, it's only in fairly limited things that would kind of result in them being harmed. So for example, I'm going to go and join the army or something like that and die in battle. It's like, well, your parents are like, I don't want you to do that. And it's not personally obligatory, so you can't do that. Or your second and third Hajj. So now again, you live in the middle of Alaska and you're going to travel across Canada and Greenland and go down through Northern Europe and then go across Eastern Europe on an epic journey on Hajj, and may or may not come home. You can't do that. If it's your Fard Hajj, fine. But if it's not Fard, you don't have to do that. And you're risking, it's a pain to your parents because they may lose you. So in these kind of things, traveling away and risking your life, leaving them for no particular benefit, right? Then you can't do these things. But let's say, for example, marriage or not marriage, right? Umar's parents tell him, you're not allowed to get married. You have to get married. You have to divorce your wife. You're not allowed to divorce your wife. You don't have to obey your parents in these things. Because it's not really their issue, right? So obviously we should be respectful, right? So you can't say, oh, actually, I don't care what you think. And you can get lost because the Sharia doesn't ask me to. That's being rude, right? It's being rude. So you can't say things that are rude to them. You can't be rude to them. That's the issue. But you basically, leaving them for no particular reason, traveling away from them for no particular reason, doing things that are, what else? So not obeying in things that would harm you. Let's say, I guess as well, like, what else? There was 3 categories, I can't remember now. I might have a question somewhere on Seeker's Guidance, I can't remember now. But it's not that many things. And so can you travel, for example, I want to go to Tarim in Yemen and study for Shafi fiqh for the last 20 years, and your parents say no. It's like, well, you can do that because it's beneficial. Or I want to go and start a company in Tokyo, and they're like, no, I want you to stay here. It would be better for you to stay here, but you can go to Tokyo and start a company, that's fine. Right? Your business or whatever it is, your business or your education or something like that. So there aren't that many things really, that you actually have to do. It's just basically you have to be respectful. That's the basic picture, right? The basic picture is you have to be respectful. Same thing with a daughter, is that, there's not that much difference. The difference is only with the daughter is that if she's a virgin, you as a father or grandfather can marry her off against her will, right? That's not the sunnah, and you shouldn't do that. But that's a kind of quite a major thing about arguably obedience. Like, you do have to marry this person even though you don't want to. In principle, right? But personally, if I was in that scenario, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that, and I don't want to marry this person, and there are other ulama, and if you really push me, I will just leave. That's what I'd do personally. Now that might not be the most religious thing to do, but personally, I wouldn't want to be in that scenario. I'll have to marry somebody I don't want to marry. And there are other positions, Imam Bukhari and Imam Ibn Mundhir, and the Hanafis, they said you can't do that. You can't force a woman to get married. And so you can't, these issues of like, okay, you own your kids, you don't own your kids, right? They have to be respectful to you, and that's about it, right? They have to support you, that's true. So in the Shafi school, we're quite strict about that. Like, if I was a millionaire, I could give all my money away and tell my sons to support me. I can do that. So I don't have enough money, and I'm not obliged to work. They have to support me. I'm 35 years old, that's fine. My kids are, for example, 20. So my 20-year-old sons, they have to earn a living and support me, and also support my wife if my wife isn't their mother, and support my kids if I have kids, etc., and all of these things. So that's not really obedience, right? But that would be a kind of a sin of the body, that you're not supporting those you're obliged to support, and along with them your parents. Slightly different, but otherwise basically unruliness, being disrespectful to your parents. So for example, physical thing with the whole body, your parents say, do not travel to Japan. And you go, why are you going to Japan? Just because I hate my parents, I don't want to be around them. You can't do that. Okay, well, you hate them because they're cruel to you? No, I just hate them because I don't like them. Okay, they don't do anything to you though, physically or emotionally. That's true, but I just hate them. I don't want to be home. Okay, that's considered, that's haram, you can't do that. But if you're going for education or going for business, that's fine. Fleeing from the battle line. So if you are in the front row, you cannot leave anymore. You're not allowed to do that. These are considered to be major sins. Other things would be, besides those, include cutting off family ties. So, for example, Ahmad is my brother. He invites me to the wedding, and I don't turn up. And I know he'll be extremely, unbelievably hurt if I didn't do that, right? So cutting off family ties does not mean not calling them every day. Cutting off family ties meaning doing something that in your culture, in your relationship, in that culture, would really, really hurt them, or be clearly seen in that regard, right? So the fact, for example, that I don't call up my second cousin every week is not considered qatiyat al-rahim. Or that I don't even call my uncle up, because he'd be like, do you need something, right? And so everybody has a different culture. Like, I had my friend in Jordan, he had to call each of his aunts up every week, and they'd be really upset if he didn't do that. They'd be like, what's wrong? What else happened, right? Whereas in my culture, it's not really a big thing, right? if my aunt sent me an email and then they didn't reply, and they sent me another email and didn't reply, and it's like, okay, you're just not really replying to my emails at all, even though it's been like 6 months, 5 years. 5 years you don't have time to respond to my email. That's pretty harsh, right? And so qatiyat al-rahim is not it's not so fixed in stone as in this or that, but you have to look at your culture, your setting, your relationship with these people, and say what is understood, what is not understood, right? And it's also on the proviso that they're not harming you directly, i.e. so you just have to be away from them. So some people, you're like, I just can't do that, I'm sorry, I can't be around my mum. Is a toxic relationship. Every single time she speaks to me, I have to go to the accident emergency with for anxiety attack. It's like, yeah, you don't have to be around her, it's okay. Just send her nice things, send her letters, don't give her your address. You can, that's fine. You're allowed to do that because that's a darura. You need to save your sanity, right? Some people unfortunately are like that, right? Certain people in their family, it's just like it's just like the grossest thing in the world, and they just cannot be around these people, and it's just like hell, right? You know, imagine, for example, the sister comes up to you and says, oh, you have to go and visit your granddad, and she's like, no, I don't want to. Oh, that's disrespectful. Yeah, but do you know how many times the granddad raped her? Okay, so put a context, right? There's a context. And so sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I didn't realize that. It's like, and some people, you know, so it's not so cut and dry, right? So we have to, you know, as Westerners, kind of assuming we're all speaking as Westerners, there's a kind of a trend to not be so family oriented, which is not very good, right? But at the same time, your family cannot control you absolutely, and you don't have to go to every single function, you don't have to see every single person, you don't have to hang out with every single person in all scenarios. It's not that extreme. Okay, and abusing other people's rights. And he says, and God is the one who grants success and assists one towards what he loves and is pleased with. So just because we hear talking doesn't mean that we're actually doing these things. Allah alone is the one who enables us to do these things. And whoever thinks that he can do it by himself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show him that he can't and make him fall on his face many times until we plead in our Fatiha and in our sujood, Ya Rabb, please help me from every single bad deed, because if it were not for your blessings upon me and your protection, I would do the worst of all things. As who said? As who? Sayyidina Yusuf himself. Right? So people are like, astaghfirullah, look at these people who do this haram things. You know, let's say for example, somebody's there thinking, astaghfirullah, look at these people who go to nightclubs or to go to and see these things. Look who they are. And they have this sense that I am a good person, they're a bad person, meaning I have the intrinsic moral strength to avoid these things. If it were not for Allah's grace, you'd be doing the vilest, most disgusting things ever. And so that's how we have to view ourselves. If it were not for Allah's kindness and generosity, we would be doing the vilest and most disgusting sins ever. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us a blessing. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is preserving us from the haram, preserving us from makruh, preserving us from foul thoughts, foul actions. Otherwise we'd be doing the worst and the lowest things possible. But when you arrogate to yourself and say, I am this person, I am, this is the ujub, right? That we mentioned, that you are self-impressed, I'm a great person, right? Like the other day, subhanAllah, we had a talk last night, and then I led the prayer in the mosque, and I go Alif Lam Mim, frozen. I just didn't know what comes next. Alif Lam Mim. ذلك الكتاب لا ريب فيه هدى للذين. Stop. Somebody corrected from behind, just frozen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding, hey Farid, you're not a shaykh, you're not an alim. The default in you is 0. You do not know and you're not capable and you are lost. Just frozen. I had no idea what it was. It happened to a great shaykh as well in the past. He forgot the Fatiha, subhanAllah. The shaykh, he's leading thousands of people, famous mufti, whatever, forgot the Fatiha. غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ, just gone. Okay, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will teach us little things. You fall up in a very embarrassing way to yourself, and inshallah no one else will find out, to say, hey, remember you need Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's help, because you can't do things by yourself. You do not have the ability. Quwwa, qudra is of Allah's sifat. Power and strength and being able to guide yourself and do what's right is of Allah's attributes, not of our attributes. Right? And so to think, I'm the one who can do this, is shirk in reality. Right? And that's why I say, إِيَّاكَ نَعْبُدُ, you alone worship, tawheed, وَإِيَّاكَ نَسْتَعِينَ, tawheed. Right? And God sends blessings and may God send blessings and salutations on our Master Muhammad and his family and companions. Khair. Okay, any questions or queries? Khair, inshallah. So no, if there's no questions or queries, then we will close here. Nothing, Shaheed? Sawabir?
One question about
Go ahead.
the kunut at the back of the text.
Yes.
The one that I memorized from Tuqari Mukhshanaf is slightly different. I think there's one line missing from that one.
Yeah, it's fine, though. It's not a big deal. Adding or subtracting, because what they'll do is the ulama is they will take the hadith and then they will add. Let's say, for example, there might be a weak narration, there might be another thing, but they'll add or subtract. It's not a big deal. Just like the tashahhud, there's like 9 tashahuds or something like that. It's not. As Imam Shafi said, if there are different qira'ats for the Quran, then when it comes to something like that, tahiyyah, there are definitely different ways of saying it, so it's not at the end of the world. Barak feek. So, no other questions? Sawabir, Umar? Suhair? Okay. Shahid, you had a question?
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you were saying about cutting family ties.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're saying is that if, for example, a relationship with a close family member, like say your mother or your father or anyone in that regard, if it was harmful to yourself to be around that person, it would be acceptable to not see that person, but you'd still have to show them some sort of respect.
Yeah.
By contacting them loosely.
Yeah, so basically, right, is الضرورات تقدر بقدرها, right? So we've come along and said you have to show respect and keep within the normal expected behavior. That means that I'm not cutting you off. Okay. So now, what's normal in your culture, for example, is that they call you up and then you call them back. Right? It's not they call you up every single week and you never ever call them back. It means you don't want to talk to them. Clearly, you do not want to talk to them. It wasn't like, oh, I'm busy today, right? It's just like you are blanking them, right? So now you're like, okay, I'll do it. And then you go to your therapist. I'm like, yeah, every single time I see my mother's name, I start having a panic attack. If I talk to her, I swear, I shout, I do this, I do that. I have to take the next day off work because I'm just messed up in my head. And then you go to the Shaykh at the mosque and he's like, no, show respect to your mother. And you're like, yeah, Rabb, I don't want to go to hellfire. And you do it again. It's like, you do not have to do that. It's okay, right? You are going through, you need therapy. And this person is a trigger right now. You need to just be away. And then you need to learn how to deal with that person in a healthy way, right? Because it's clearly like, this is just extreme, right? Or every single time I see my cousin, every single time is a fight, every single time, without exception, right? So do I have to turn up at his wedding? Do I have to turn up at a wedding where he's going to be the main person and he's going to come up to me and ask these same questions and try to do the same thing? No, I don't.
I think what I'm trying to ask is, does it have to be at that level of being diagnosed by a doctor?
No, but it should be pretty serious, right? You've got to be careful. So even Ibn Hajar, he mentions, you don't have to do this and you don't have to do this about obeying your parents. But then he says, don't be fooled by what I'm saying. Because I'm talking only technically. You don't have to do this, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do this. And in this scenario, you wouldn't have to do this. And in that scenario, you wouldn't have to do that. Like, it's very, very chill in the Shafi school. Very, very chill. He says, don't be fooled. By default, he says, as his personal advice, always do what your parents say, unless somebody who has ilm and who is a sahib hal, like somebody who really fears Allah, tells you you don't have to do it. You know, so it's like that. It's like, genuinely, you should be very careful. Like, okay, I'm scared. You know, I'm scared about these things, right? I'm concerned, right? But at the same time, it shouldn't be like, you got to be realistic. It's like, it's clearly harming you. You know, you shouldn't be in that scenario. And there are people like that. I know, for example, a sheikh, like he's Eastern, and he doesn't live with his mum. His mum lives in a care home, and she's not that old. But it's like, his mother is toxic. And he recognized that, separated her. Like, he has, like, you know, he doesn't live, you know, you'd be like shocked. You're like, oh, like, he's not like a kind of an Western sheikh. Like, okay, I guess you don't live with your mum. It's like, you're very Eastern. It's like, that's very disrespectful. Like in Jordan, if your mum lived by herself, it's like, well, why? It doesn't make sense. No, none of the family lives with her. It's like really weird. But it's like, yeah, there's a problem. Like, this lady is toxic. You know, you can be around her. Maybe, let's say, he's the only person who can be around her for a limited time, but the kids are not allowed to be around her, and his wife not allowed to be around her. Khalas, because it's just like horrible. And you know, so there are scenarios like that. You see them, right? So you got to balance it out, right? Sometimes you just hate you just really don't like people, right? And so you know, so you got to balance it. Suppose you had a family member who are not Muslims, but every time you go around them, they're all arguing about Islam, right? So let's say, for example, you fear that and I fear that if I'm in this scenario, I'm going to lose my deen. I don't have to go there. Like, I fear, if I see my parents, they have a lot of convincing arguments against Islam, I don't want to go there. And I don't have the knowledge yet, I don't want to do that, fine. Many converts do that. That's very useful. My dad was like, he became Muslim, just disappeared for 2 years, 3 years, something like that. It's gone. It's useful. You do need that, you know. His name's Philip as well, right? You know, and it's like you need that sometimes, right? Sometimes you just need that gap. You need that gap just to find your feet, and it's you know, it can happen. So, but every time you go around, it's always an argument about Islam. They are constantly attacking and condemning Islam. Yeah. So again, it's like, how how bad is it, right? They're constantly doing it. That's not a problem. The mere fact that they're constantly doing it, maybe you can have a healthy discussion, or you can show them how Islam teaches you how to react to somebody who's condemning you. So that in itself is not a problem. The fact that there's a heated argument, let's say from their side every single time, is not a problem. What I'm talking about is, it is breaking you. Right? It is breaking you. And it's like, people get into these scenarios that, you know, Mufti Mink says this, he says sometimes, you know, the people say, you know, look after your mother, so look after your mother, you know, listen to your mother. He says, yeah, but sometimes it will lead you to the hellfire. And you see these weird scenarios where, like, the mother is ruining the marriage, the mother is doing this, the mother, it's like, no, it's like, you need to separate these things, it's wrong. And you do not have, it's particularly when you're young, you do not have the social or religious skills to deal with it. And sometimes it's like, yeah, I just can't deal with it. You know, sometimes it means you do things in the wrong way, you do things in a rude way, you do things in an appropriate way, you go to two extremes. You're like, well, I guess because it's my dad and it's his birthday, I can kind of drink because, you know, and you go to one extreme, and then you're like, no, I'm not even going to go in his house because the whole house is najasa, because he has a dog, or he used to have a dog. You know, you do extreme things you don't know, right? And it kind of is all over the place. But, you know, sometimes it's just like, yeah, just you need to be away, and that's it. So the point is, ad-dararu yuzal, harm should be removed. If there's clear harm and this is affecting you too much, or it's affecting the people you go with, then you don't have to do that. It's not. So the point is that respect for family, respect for, you know, being with family is not absolute every single thing, right? You don't have to do these things. Or when I go to my friend's house, my cousins are going to be there and they're all dressed inappropriately. So, well, I don't have to be there, then do I? Right? I don't have to be there, or there's alcohol or all sorts of things. I don't have to do that. So just find another way and be nice. You know, it's hard to strike a balance. It is honestly hard. I can sit here and give a whole lecture about striking a balance, and you'll be asking me this, and then I see in my own family be like, I don't think you're really striking a balance, Farid, right? It's hard because when you're in it, it's hard, right? It's not easy. But I'm just giving you the tool, I'm just giving the idea, the concept. Otherwise, actually trying to do it, everyone has to work it out in their own way. It's not easy. Is it, for example, too much, let's say, to go to your parents' house like 4 times a week if you're married and you have kids? Right? You might argue with it, yeah, and so like your parents are now upset because you used to come around 4 times a week, and now it's like, I'm only going to come around once. Like maybe even once is quite a lot because you're not at home that much. You've got work, and then there's kids, and then they got their homework, and they got their this, and they got that. So you don't really have any spare time really for your kids, and any spare time you do have, it goes with your parents. So it's not really, fair. I mean, I remember when I was in Jordan, my dad was telling me, oh, we don't see you anymore. I said to my dad, you do realize I have a full-time job, I have 3 very young kids, and I have a mother. So my mum lived at one end of the street with her husband, and my dad lived the other street with his wife. So it's like, if I have spare time, it's like my kids, and then my mum, and then you, right? And so it's like, I'm sorry, like I'm not like, kind of like, I don't have all the time in the world. You have to be I'm not trying to be rude, but he's like, oh, I don't see you, you're not free, whatever. It's like, sorry, like, what do I do, right? Maybe I did it wrong, I did a bad job, may Allah forgive me, right? But, I'm not talking about specifics, I'm talking about tools, right? Way of thinking about it. And again, everyone has to answer to themselves, because it's not set in, what is exactly set in stone. You have to do this. If you see your parents, you have to do this. I remember once picking my shoes up for my dad, was like, Farid, don't be silly, right? And that in some cultures that's kind of understood. You would pick your shoes up for your dad, and maybe you put them on for him or something, who knows? But like my dad was like, don't be silly, Farid, Does that make sense to everybody? Inshallah. Another thing, parents asking about your money, they don't have anything to do with your money. They're like, why are you spending your money like this? Tell me how much money you made. That's not their business. Oh, he feels upset because you didn't tell him how much money you make. It's not his business. How much money you make, or what did you spend on Eid for the kids? And oh, you're spending too much money, you're not spending enough money. You should buy a house, you shouldn't buy a house, you should invest, you shouldn't. It's like, that's not the parent. That's not disrespectful to say to your parents, I'm sorry, but that's my money. That's my life. I am an independent person from you. So then they're really offended. Yeah, because they're babying you and they're really offended, right? And it's like, it's not healthy, right? Subhanallah. Okay, jazakum khair. Subhanallah bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.